Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, and most importantly, Happy New Year. Jim, it probably says something about where we're headed in 2024 and maybe our gloomy predictions for the most part for the year to come, as we revealed on Friday that in tracking stories for the past week and a half, we have no good martinis to kick off the year. I could go on a lengthy discussion about Michigan's win in the Rose Bowl yesterday, but I'm guessing people probably don't want that. So anyway, I'm happy about that. That's my good martini for the day. But anyway, Happy New Year to you, and let's roll up our sleeves and get into it, right?
Yeah, Happy New Year to you, Greg. That's a regional good martini, disputed good martini. But we will continue to we'll keep looking for good ones. Maybe by the end of the week we'll have one.
Hopefully, that's for sure. All right, well, let's talk about a little bit about what happened while we were gone, and then a couple things that are more breaking. But while we were gone, the Maine Secretary of State, her name is Shenna Bellows. She is not even a lawyer, but nonetheless, she ruled that former President Trump cannot appear on the state's 2024 Republican primary ballot. Now, this follows on the heels of the Colorado Supreme Court ruling the same thing. Other states, including Michigan, again ruling that Trump can appear. And now Colorado's in dispute. Apparently, the Secretary of State says it's okay. The Supreme Court says it's not. I guess it's still all headed to the Supreme Court now, with Maine joining the pile here. But in addition to Maine now joining this argument, we also have the preemptive attacks on the Supreme Court as this case ultimately gets decided there, I guess. Jamie Raskin himself, an ardent election denier from 2016, of course, is now a massive crusader for democracy when it benefits his party. And he told Dana Bash on State of the Union a couple days ago, Clarence Thomas has to recuse himself from any decisions about Trump's ballot access because of his wife's involvement in the 2020 Trump campaign. And he wasn't exactly shy about suggesting something that might have to happen if Thomas doesn't recuse. Take a listen.
Anybody looking at this in any kind of dispassionate, reasonable way would say if your wife was involved in the big lie and claiming that Donald Trump had actually won the presidential election, had been agitating for that and participating in the events leading up to January 6th, that you shouldn't be participating.
So he should recuse himself.
He should. Oh, he absolutely should recuse himself. The question is, what do we do if he doesn't recuse himself?
So, Jim, the Democrats love to have double standards on this issue, but what do you make of Raskin not only insisting that a Supreme Court justice has to recuse himself, and then and not so veiled warning to Clarence Thomas?
From my perspective, it was bad enough when the Colorado Supreme Court decided, well, we've decided Trump is guilty of this. Never mind the fact that he hasn't been charged with this. Never mind that he hasn't been convicted of this. We've decided that our judgment is close enough to decide that he has committed this heinous crime and therefore he must be kept off the ballot. But if you want, at least it's a court, right? You know, I think that's a specious argument. There was a couple legal scholars who've said, no, you don't need a conviction. Other branches of the government can just unilaterally decide that you've committed an insurrection and therefore must be kept off the ballot. What we're seeing here up in Maine was the Secretary of State saying, yeah, I, in my infinite wisdom, have decided this. Now, when the Colorado Supreme Court decision came down, the following morning I was on Hugh Hewitt's program, and Hugh thinks that the Supreme Court will strike this down 9-0, that this is not even remotely debatable. This is not even remotely constitutional. It's a kind of a legal embarrassment. This is clearly looking for a particular kind of verdict or a particular kind of outcome and then reasoning your way backwards. And I hope Hugh's right. I think we need a clear, resolute decision on this that doesn't leave any wiggle room and that doesn't say, well, maybe this. I know oftentimes the court likes to have narrowly tailored decisions. But in this case, I think it's a formula for chaos for either state Supreme Courts or secretaries of state to just unilaterally decide certain candidates cannot be on the ballot. Now, is Trump a really unusual and unique case? Yes. But if you're going to keep somebody off the ballot because of a crime, I think you need a conviction of that crime. I know certainly, oh, no, you don't. Look, for the legal purposes and the sake of the country, a presidential candidate or a potential president has to have that day in court. And I noticed, Trump's got 92 or 91, various federal felony charges up against him. But leading an insurrection is not one of them. And I don't think it's because Jack Smith just forgot. So anyway, everything we said for the Colorado case stands for, is equally applicable to the Maine Secretary of State argument. I think what I'm now just going to wonder is, let's assume that the Supreme Court comes down and says, no, this is nonsense. You can't do this. What are the consequences going to be for either those 4 Colorado Supreme Court justices or for the Maine Secretary of State? Because they just went way off the reservation. They just went willy-nilly in an effort, I suspect, to pour gasoline onto the fire of the political divisions in this country. Perhaps the Maine Secretary of State, who's run for Senate before, has aspirations to higher office. I don't know. But I know if you're trying to, stir up a fan base amongst the Democratic Party, unilaterally throwing Donald Trump off the ballot is a good way to do it. So what are the consequences for these folks going to be if the Supreme Court comes down and says, yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about. There's no constitutional basis for this. So we'll see. But that's why, all in all, this has to be, look, it's probably going to end with Donald Trump on the ballot, as he should be. But I kind of wonder whether this is there'll be more rewards for the mischief makers in this case than there will be for negative consequences.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any political consequences for them for the most part, certainly not within their own parties. What do you make of Raskin telling Clarence Thomas, you better stay out of this or else?
Thank you for reminding me. Look, in the end, whatever stands in the way of progressivism is eventually going to get deemed illegitimate, right? If it's referendums, they'll say that referendums are crazy populism run amok. If it is the legislatures, we've got these crazy right-wing state legislators that are doing these things. Anything, they just shift the ball. When the liberals have the presidency, this FDR, my goodness, we need to expand the size of government. When a conservative's in the presidency, oh my God, we have an imperial presidency. Whatever stands in their way gets delegitimized, and the Supreme Court right now is the single biggest obstacle to the progressive agenda. Therefore, it must be delegitimized. And I'd love to see, well, okay, Raskin, what are you going to do if Thomas doesn't recuse himself? Are you going to run around saying the Supreme Court is no longer legitimate? Hey, remember, weren't the Democrats saying they're going to be the party of norms, the party of respecting the law, the party of Again, it's all situational ethics. It's all saying I have one standard for the folks on my side, one standard for the other. They had no objections to the gifts of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They had no objections to the gifts or speaking gigs or any of the other stuff of any of the other justices. They only look for ones that can say, hey, our opposition is corrupt and therefore illegitimate, and therefore we can disregard the Supreme Court if we want to. And you have to elect us. And our pledge is to ignore the Supreme Court or to overrule it by expanding it, because we're the only way to preserve democracy.
All right, on to our second bad martini, but there's also a huge amount of crazy here. And Jim, I know you're going to be shocked to hear this, just absolutely shocked. But apparently, a couple of years ago, Congress approved $7.5 billion to rush out 500,000 electric vehicle chargers. And as of last month, they've built either none or one. Fox News says none. Reason says one. And here's Reason, putting this into perspective as only Reason can do.
2 years ago, Congress spent $7.5 billion on electric vehicle chargers. How many have been built? One. That's $7.5 billion for this. This story makes me want to yell. Show me the money! Because where did the money go? Seriously, where did it go? There are so many stories like this, where government will spend billions on projects with little or nothing to show for them. Like the Pentagon, which can account for $220 billion in gear given to contractors, and they failed 6 audits in a row. Or Biden's $42 billion broadband project, even though more than 90% of Americans already have access to high-speed internet. The VA bought 10,000 iPhones for $8 million. Never used 8,500 of them. And never forget, $400 billion in COVID aid was either wasted or stolen. So the next time the feds propose to spend a bunch of money on a big new shiny stimulus project, even if it sounds great, don't forget how government spending projects really work.
So as Reason points out, Jim, it's the latest in a very long line of the government grossly wasting and mismanaging our money. So I'm sure you're not surprised, but what do you make of $7.5 billion either not getting anything done yet or being almost entirely wasted?
Skeptics of federal spending are not shocked. I saw it when you called my attention to that story, Greg. I thought of a story we saw around mid-December. President Biden was getting irritated that he spent his first 2 years in office getting these gargantuan spending bills passed, the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better and the stimulus bill and all that stuff. And he's now in his final year of his term. And they can't go to visit big construction sites to say, hey, look at what your federal tax dollars are doing. Why can he not do it? Because of all the red tape that it's caught in, because of lawsuits, because of all the kind of stuff. Basically, that money got spent very early in the Biden administration. And you can't point to a half-completed highway interchange or a new federal building or roads, bridges, all the kinds of stuff that we were promised we were going to get. Lo and behold, there's nothing to show for it yet, or very little to show for it yet. Now, you might be, those of us with long memories are thinking about Obama and the shovel-ready jobs. And way back in March 2021, a White House fact sheet said, these are turning shovel-worthy ideas into shovel-ready projects. Greg, do you think we need a shovel for very different reasons to handle all of the bovine material that has been generated in all these promises? Lo and behold, the federal government is not it's not an efficient spender of money. Does it mean we don't need roads and bridges? No, it's just observing that this process. I mean, we used to build battleships in less than exceptionally fast time during World War II because we had to, right? You look at other countries that don't have the kind of bureaucratic processes. They don't have environmental reviews to see how it's affecting the snail darter and all that stuff. Other countries can build stuff pretty darn fast. We can't because we have chosen to have this system in which every conceivable step has to be either reviewed by some sort of commission that moves at the pace of the aforementioned snail darters, or it basically gets tied up in lawsuits and argument. Oh, no, you can't build here. You got to build this. Or this is going to cast too many shadows and stuff like that. We made the choice to have that kind of system. And by the way, there was a separate polling that they put out before Biden, have you heard of Build Back Better? Have you heard of the Inflation Reduction Act, wink, wink, and all these major pieces of legislation? And it turned out big chunks of the public had never heard of these bills. So the entire Democratic philosophy of government is we get into office and we make these giant spending projects, and that will make American lives better. And it doesn't. It doesn't because it takes too long and everything gets tied up in red tape. And it also doesn't work for them politically because basically most Americans don't pay attention to any of this stuff. So that's where we stay with these things. So we shouldn't be the least bit shocked that after saying, we're going to electrify the American cars across the country. No. The money gets moved very, very slowly, gets tied up in endless red tape, and very little gets done, certainly not on anything resembling an appropriate schedule.
So, Jim, I looked this up. They want 500,000 EV chargers. We apparently have, as of 2020, 150,000 gas stations that service roughly 276 million cars. So they say if a station has between 6 and 12 pumps, we have anywhere from 900,000 to 1.8 million pumps. They're going to probably argue that if we can just get the 500,000 and maybe even double that, we'll be all set to go when we have these EV mandates in a decade or so. Well, what they're going to forget, of course, is that it takes an hour to charge your car as opposed to 5 minutes filling up. So even if they got the 500,000 online, what they want to happen in a relatively short period of time, they're still not going to be anywhere close to ready for. It's among many other factors, but just the practicality of this, in addition to the government boondoggle, is something else.
Greg, when you see decisions like this, do you find yourself wondering, what do the people who are making these decisions drive? Because if they lived with the consequences of these decisions, they'd probably, oh my goodness, wow. Actually, first of all, it takes an hour to recharge my thing. That's a pain in the neck. And, pretty much, unless you're out in the middle of the desert somewhere, unless you're out in some real long stretch between points of civilization, even the smallest of towns in the United States has a gas station, right? And, usually got a couple of pumps. Wherever you are in this country, if you're anywhere near towns, near major highways, stuff like that, you can find a gas station fairly quickly. You can fill your tank in, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, probably depends on how long your tank, not that long. And that's what makes this mobility. And this entire system did not come from some top-down, President Eisenhower saying we must have this many gas stations, this many, miles apart. This just came out of the natural, processes of the free market of gas station companies and gas companies saying, hey, you know what? A lot of people drive around there. It'd make a lot of sense to put a gas station there. And then the next guy says, I'm going to do mine across the street and I'm going to sell it for 1 cent cheaper. And that's how this whole system works. And it's fantastic. And instead, we got a whole bunch of central planners who are saying, no, we can switch everybody off to electricity. Trust us. It'll work just fine.
Beautifully said. Exactly right. As frustrating as that is, let's talk about something much, much better than that, and that is our great sponsor, 4Patriots. Don't forget about their new website, 4patriots.com/martini. A few of the currently listed items before the deal is gone include the Halo XT Tactical Solar Flashlight, a 4-pack for only $119. The Starfire Camp Stove, buy 3, get 1 free. The Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket is 80% off right now, and the Solar Go Fridge keeps things cold without using ice. But of course, don't forget about their most famous products, including the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. The solar generator charges more devices for longer in a blackout with double the capacity and more peak power than ever before. Plus, we've got the best-selling survival food kits designed to last for 25 years using real meat and vegetables. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone. And get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our final martini. Also bad. It's the subject of your morning jolt today, and it's the story of the never-ending drama over a new FBI headquarters. The one thing I think most people can agree on is that the current FBI headquarters is in shambles. You do a good job of explaining today in the Jolt of how pieces of the building are falling apart, pieces of the ceiling in the parking garage are falling apart. We had a friend that used to work for the FBI that had to work off-site because of mold in the building that was extremely bad for their health. So the question over quite a few years now has been where to build this new headquarters. There hasn't seemed to be much emphasis on building it again in Washington, D.C., although in a post on Truth Social over the weekend, Donald Trump wants to do exactly that in an excellent or spectacular building somewhere downtown. But the fight, for the most part, has been between Virginia and Maryland. Virginia wants it in Springfield, which is at the bottom end of the Beltway, and then Greenbelt, Maryland, which is just outside the Beltway, up in Maryland. On the Virginia side, it's much closer to the FBI Academy at Quantico, Virginia. Greenbelt might be slightly closer to the Washington field office. Now, as the Wall Street Journal reports, a senior Biden appointee picked the Maryland location, overruling a panel of career, General Services Administration, and FBI officials who had unanimously recommended a site in Springfield, again, not far from Quantico, as well as some other sites. And so, Jim, it looks like there was some shady political dealings going on here. Chris Wray wants an investigation, and there is one actually going on. Virginia's lawmakers at the federal level howling mad about this as well. And so you have now dug into this following Trump's post. So what did you find? And is it even a possibility this could get reversed?
This decision is already under investigation by the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. So and it's not often you will see FBI Director Christopher Wray in agreement with both of our senators here in Virginia, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, Democrats, as well as the Republican governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. And I'm going to say all the members of Congress from Virginia except for 2. And all saying this move stinks. It emits an odor of favoritism and political interference. I actually first started digging into this because of this past weekend. Trump is on Truth Social, and he kind of surprised a lot of people by saying that the FBI did need a new headquarters. It did need to be improved, but it should not be moved to a faraway location. By the way, Greenbelt is like just outside the Beltway in Maryland. It's not really that far away. It should stay right where it is in a new and spectacular building in the best location in our now crime-ridden and filthy, dirty, graffiti-scarred capital. They should be bringing it back to D.C., not running away from it, especially the violent crime. Well, first of all, there's no indication that violent crime, that the FBI is fleeing D.C. because of that. As you mentioned, it's because the current headquarters building is falling apart. It was built in the 1970s. I've heard some people arguing it should be able to last long, and I think there's two factors. One is, first of all, it's this sterling example of mid-1970s ugly brutalist architecture. That it's not a typical office building, right? You need a crime lab. I know they used to have the shooting gallery and the shooting range in the basement that they used to do as part of the tour back in the pre-9/11 days. The FBI, it's a building that the FBI has unusual needs for the building. And it just sounds like, you're dealing with 50-year-old pipes, 50-year-old electrical wiring. I'm sure they've periodically upgraded it for the internet and stuff like that. But it sounds like it's on its last legs. 20 years ago is when they basically said, hey, this building's starting to no longer fit our needs. And they've gone back and forth. I don't think it's really disputable that this current status is untenable. They can't fit everybody in there that they need. They're working in like 11 different satellite offices around the D.C. area. The General Services Administration, and we just talked about how poorly the government does at recognizing when it's wasting money on, supposed to be building electrical chargers and stuff. Even the General Services Administration says, hey, we're spending a lot to rent these offices around D.C. Maybe it would make more sense if we built a new campus. And I think, if you're starting from scratch, you could have all the state-of-the-art crime lab facilities and everything you want in that kind of circumstance. As you alluded to, they've gone back and forth on this for a bunch. I have no dog in this fight in terms of the location. As Northern Virginians, we hate traffic as it is. Putting it in Springfield all three sites had certain problems. But it's kind of surprising that they went with Greenbelt, in part because yes, it's near a metro station, which was, but you look at the total list of the FBI's criteria for this, some of them are contradictory. If you want a site, as you mentioned, that is near Quantico, where the training facility is, and hostage rescue and all that stuff, and you want a site that's near the U.S. Department of Justice building, and you want a site that's near the White House, and you want a site that's near Capitol Hill, and you want a site that's, centrally located, in the end, you end up right back where you are at the current FBI headquarters, right? But the Greenbelt site, first of all, half of it is like wetlands, and we also just alluded to how hard it is to build something near wetlands, and all that stuff. The Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority needs to build a parking garage to replace a parking lot that is on that site. And they can't even get started till MTA gets that done. There are major fixed infrastructure costs associated with building a facility on any of these three sites, and Landover and Greenbelt had land acquisition costs because they were not government owned. At least the advantage of Springfield is that the federal government already owns the land, and so you don't have that headache. So it sounded like everybody who was going into this decision was looking at this saying, yeah, none of these sites are perfect, but Springfield is the best one. Certainly sounded like Christopher Wray was leaning that way. And then out of nowhere, Biden appointee Nina Albert, who used to be vice president of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, comes in at General Services Administration and says, yep, we're picking Greenbelt. So it just happened to work out for the place she used to work, suddenly is sitting on exceptionally valuable land that will at some point have to be sold or transferred to the federal government, much to the benefit of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. And as I mentioned, it wasn't just Wray. It was on the one hand, this is a regional fight between Virginia lawmakers and Maryland lawmakers. But you look at all the problems on the other two Maryland sites. You look at the previous recommendations for this one. It certainly does look like this was a, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Old-fashioned political favoritism going on here. So as I put it, Donald Trump, the old saying, right church, wrong pew. Yes, this decision stinks. Yes, there is really legitimate reason to say this is favoritism, this is corruption, this is playing politics. It doesn't belong in Greenbelt. Springfield would be the stronger candidate. And yes, by the way, the FBI does need a new building. I suppose you could eventually move everybody out of the FBI building, tear it down, and build something completely new and different. But God, that would cost a lot. That would take a lot of time. You got to find some place to put everybody else. And once you move everybody out, you might as well keep them in that location. So that is the status of things. Wrote about it today. The Inspector General report, I assume, could look at this and say, yes, this stinks to high heaven too, and we find this an unethical level of political interference. We'll see how this shakes out. But Greg, as I put all this out today, do you notice how this was completely ignored by the news cycle? I live in this area, and I'd only heard about the Greenbelt decision. I hadn't heard about any controversies until I started digging into it. So anyway, that's the state of things. Hopefully someday the FBI gets a new I know people can be upset about Lisa Page and Jim Comey. Yes, there are some really bad dudes. You ask for miracles, I give you the FBI. But nonetheless, I think there are enough good people who are working there, not just agents Johnson & Johnson. who really do need, like, I'd like them to have the best facilities so they continue to prosecute fentanyl traffickers and drug cartels and child sex abusers. The FBI, and they put out press releases every time they get a guilty plea or a guilty plea or a conviction, and they prosecute these people all day long. So if you want to be mad at the FBI for political interference or moving really slow on Hunter Biden, I get that. Okay. But don't forget all the other guys who are doing really important work. And if we decide, let's screw over the FBI, these are the folks who have to protect us. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Anyway, Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, there's quite the political blowback to Trump's post there because of people who are saying, the FBI's gotten so incredibly political on a number of different issues. So if they could commit to actually doing the job they were created to do in the first place, that would be great. You're right that a lot of those people who work there are very solid people and they're patriots, but a lot of people in the top, there's a lot of rot up there. So hopefully we can get the FBI back to doing what it used to do best. Jim? Happy New Year. Like you said, we came in with fire today. We'll see what we have in store for us tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Also, don't forget to listen to all of our year-end specials if you haven't done that yet. 6 of them leading up to the end of the year and our choices for Person of the Year. Also, thank you for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please do that if you haven't done it already. They are a huge help. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Tuesday and join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.